Okay, dreamer, please.
Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Happy April Fools! I'm sure many of you have heard of the highly acclaimed 7 Deadly Sins series and recently released 7 Deadly Sins Grand Cross. So I thought, wouldn't it be perfect timing for Netmarble to release the collab heroes now? As you may already know, Japan and Korea servers of 7 Knights released 5 of the 7 Deadly Sins characters: Meliodas, Ban, King, Elizabeth, Diane 4 years ago, and out of 5, only Meliodas and Ban had awakened forms. The other 3 only had 6-star unawakened forms. So of course, in the current context of 7 Knights, I'm thinking, what if all these heroes had mythical awakened forms? And what if all 7 sins were included with Elizabeth? Yeah, RIP our resources, but in any case, I decided to get creative and this video was born. So let's start with Meliodas. He will keep his offensive typing, and I also streamlined all character art to 3 looks: a 6-star version with his classic look, an awakened version where he changes into demon form, and finally his mythical awakened version where he fully becomes Demon Meliodas. For his passive full counter, he increases his counter rate by 30%, reflects 40% of all magic damage taken, and decreases fixed damage dealt to all allies by 30%. So the idea here is to mimic full counter, which allows Meliodas to reflect any sort of magic attack back to the enemy. Of course, for 7 Knight purposes, it's hard to implement 100% reflect, so this is as OP as I think it can be. For his skill 1, Enchant Hellblaze, it deals 250% physical damage on 3 enemies, applies 30% crit rate, and also decreases their recovery rate by 50% for 4 turns. For his second skill, Divine Slayer, deals 240% physical damage to 3 enemies with the highest attack and ignores 30% of defense. For his awakened skill, Demon Power, it deals 280% physical damage to all enemies, ignores 50% of the defense, and increases his crit rate by 50% from here on. So his skills are mainly damage focused. As much as I wanted to give him more utility, I think it counters his design concept of being a super strong fighter. For his effect attack, it deals 200% physical damage to the target and also deals 50% physical damage to all enemies in the same row. Now for the fun part, his exclusive item. As you may know, each of the Deadly Sins have their own sacred treasures which unlock the full potential of their abilities. So I went along with this concept. So these are his stage 1 and stage 2 upgrades. You can see that it's okay, but for his stage 3, this is about to get epic. Upon unlocking it, Meliodas gains his Revenge counter ability after using his awakened skill. Revenge counter allows Meliodas to reduce all damage taken by 80% for 4 times. I wanted to build on the idea where he can summon up to 4 clones with his sacred treasure powers, and once that happens, every 5th attack received, Meliodas will strike back with 1000 physical damage on 1 enemy, ignoring 30% defense. It's a skill where Meliodas stores a huge amount of power from his enemy's attacks and then finally unleashes it back very strongly. It is an insanely strong ability which I think could even be used in modes like Heavenly Stairs, outside of PvP. In PvP, this could potentially clean a couple of enemies fast, but I balanced it by having a turn count placed on it. I mean, don't we all miss unique skills for our heroes? I tried to stay as true as possible to the character's original concept and design, so now let's move on to Ban. Ban is also an offensive hero. For his passive Snatch, he increases lethal rate of all allies by 20% and increases lethal damage by 30%. Ban is able to increase the lethal rate of his allies, making him not just a PvP based unit, but also lets you use him in PvE if you like. For his skill 1 Banishing Kill, he deals 280% physical damage to 2 enemies and additionally also deal 20,000 fixed damage on them and increases their skill cooldown by 30 seconds. For his skill 2 Fox Hunt, he deals 220% physical damage to 4 enemies and exploits the vulnerability of all the targets, which means he won't be able to miss and he will also deal slightly more damage. For his awakened skill Physical Hunt, he deals 300% physical damage to 3 enemies, decreases their attack stat by 50% for 3 turns, and also increases his physical attack by 50% for 3 turns. So this was designed to fully mimic the original idea of Physical Hunt, where Ban could steal the physical powers of enemies and buff himself with that stolen power. Overall, like Meliodas, Ban is also a more attack-oriented unit. For his effect attack, he deals 200% as usual, and 80% chance to apply bleed for 2 turns on the enemy. Once again, with his exclusive item Kurachos, he is able to enhance his abilities, he not only gains lifesteal capabilities and increased defense, unlocking his stage 3 he is able to survive on 1 HP, and this activates his ability Zero Sign, which in the original show lets him become untargetable. I didn't want him to nullify damage completely, so I think gaining height and evasion kinda fits the idea of Zero Sign in the closest way. Also, since the idea of Zero Sign is so that he can sneak up on enemies, I decided to add in the ability to convert one target's HP to 1. Now for Elizabeth, from here on, all these heroes previously do not have awakened skill animations, so they are completely newly imagined by myself. Elizabeth is a support hero. I guess that makes her a first special support hero. Her passive Invigorate decreases all damage taken by allies by 20% and increases her own block rate by 20%. Her skill 1 healing power recovers all allies' HP equal to 40% of her magic attack for 2 turns and removes debuffs from all allies. This is a pretty standard healing and cleansing skill which Lina and Hayoung also have, but we have the next skill, Goddess of Light. It deals 180% magic damage on 4 enemies, casts a shield on all allies to absorb 8000 damage, and also revives all fallen allies with 30% HP. This skill amps up her utility and support role. Not only does it provide HP shields, it can also revive fallen allies, and I've also made this a damaging skill unlike the original design. For her Awakened skill arc, it deals 250% magic damage to all enemies, resets skill cooldown for allies in the backline, and also decreases damage taken by allies from offensive and magic heroes by 40% for 4 turns. This Awakened skill arc suits Elizabeth really well as she possesses immense power within herself due to her race. Arc is a very powerful skill in 7 lately since, and while it is a damaging skill, I gave it some utility as well. She reduces damage taken by allies even more, making her very suited to be in tank teams and the PvE frontline. For her effect attack, she decreases skill cooldown by 10 seconds, and for her exclusive item, the Leonis Earring, it is a symbol of her princess status. Unlocking her stage 1 lets her deal even more damage with arc on attack-oriented enemies. Unlocking that stage 3 opens up her unique ability Tranquilize, which serves to cleanse enemy buffs frequently when she attacks. Overall, she looks to be a pretty solid support hero which we could use. Next up we have King. King is undoubtedly a magic hero. For his passive Disaster, he decreases enemy status resist rate and increases crit rate of all allies. Some background info about Disaster. The original idea of this power is that King has the ability to elevate or worsen the natural state of something. So the idea here is that he would raise the crit rate of his allies while decreasing the status resist rate of his enemies. Why is this important? Let's look at his skills. For his skill 1, Form 4 Sunflower, it deals 300% magic damage on 3 enemies and has 30% chance to burn those hit. Skill 2, Form 5 Increase, it deals 600% magic damage on 1 enemy with the highest defense, applies 30% additional lethal rate, and also has 80% chance to poison those hit. So this is why reducing status effect resist rate is important for King, because he has very insane status effects. Think of Alim, who is able to cast Silence, Burn and Bleed. This isn't as crazy, especially when he doesn't hit as many targets. For his Awakened skill Form 1 Justiful, it deals 300% magic damage to all enemies, ignores 60% of defense, and also changes the formation of all enemies. For his effect attack, he decreases buff duration by 1 turn on the target, and just when you think he couldn't beat Alim in terms of CC, I chose to give him Paralyzed due to the immense electrifying powers of the Justiful in true form. His Awakened skill already hits really hard, and adding this status makes it even more terrifying. But the madness doesn't end. When his stage 3 is unlocked, he gains the ability status promotion. The idea here is to push his disaster capabilities even more, such that King is able to cause mild statuses to become severe. So he increases his status cast rate by 20% and also immediately magnifies all burn and poison as long as he successfully lands them. This gives the enemy no chance to cleanse it. Pretty sick, isn't it? Next we have Diane. She was originally a universal type hero in Korea server, but I decided to make her defensive since she is after all a character who has a very strong connection to the earth. For her passive creation, she decreases all physical damage taken by 30% and decreases cooldown of all allies by 10 seconds with her basic attack. This is similar to Ares, Seek, and Aragon. For her skill 1, Heavy Metal, she increases block rate by 50% and also becomes immune to single target damage and skill effects for 6 turns. Diane's body turns to steel and becomes extremely bulky and even becomes immune to single target damage and single target skill effects. Hopefully you can see where I'm going with this. Obviously this is not only going to be pretty insane in PvP, but it also makes her a great unit in Heavenly Stairs against those annoying Spinas, Sebastians and Batteries. For her skill 2 Ground Gladius, she deals 800% physical damage on one enemy and increases the backline allies' awaken gauge by 3. This helps to charge the awaken gauge of important damage dealers in your formation, whether in PvP or PvE. This would help because in my mind I do foresee Diane going with a speed build, which will be further justified later. For her Awaken skill Mother Catastrophe, she deals 200% physical damage to all enemies and decreases their crit rate by 30% for 4 turns. For her Effect Attack, she decreases the Awaken gauge of all enemies in the same line by 3. Her Effect Attack carries the same idea of her slamming down against a target and also causing peripheral effects for those enemies in the same line. For her exclusive item the Gideon, her stage 1 unlocks Taunt for herself for 6 turns. Taunt will seal the deal to make her an even better tanker than Ares is. Basically it protects all other heroes as well and draws in all those single target skills which she is immune against. Her stage 3 ties in with the actual power of her large hammer Gideon. It has the ability to absorb magic attacks and channel them to the ground to erase them. So I figured it will grant the entire team a reduction from magic damage and also let Diane deal fixed damage similar to shockwaves every third attack. Sate, moving on to the remaining 3 characters who have never been released. Let's start off with Gowther. I made Gowther to be a universal hero because Gowther himself isn't so much an attacker but more of a utility unit. For his passive invasion, he grants allies immunity to cooldown increase, but he also gets a longer awakened skill activation gauge. Why does he get that? We'll see in a while. For his skill 1 Rewrite Light, it deals 250% magic damage on 3 enemies, decreases their awaken gauge and also removes buffs. The idea of Rewrite Light is to alter Gowther's enemies' memories while shooting them with light arrows, so reducing awaken gauges and removing buffs seem to fit in with the idea as if nothing ever happened. Skill 2 Blackout Arrow deals 350% magic damage on one enemy, 80% chance to apply Blackout for 2 turns. Now this is where Gowther's signature and unique ability comes in. Blackout Arrow, a single target skill with a brand new status effect called Blackout. Under a blackout condition, the enemy cannot attack like how Sleep, Electrify and Paralyze work. The passive of the enemy will also be invalidated. Basically the idea of this is to erase the enemy's existence from the battlefield. Furthermore, all attacks landed on the target will crit. For his awakened skill Nightmare Teller, he deals 300% magic damage to 3 enemies, applies 30% additional crit rate and has a 30% chance to apply Blackout for 2 turns. If his target is already inflicted with Blackout, he will reduce the HP of the target by 7,000. Gowther's infamous Nightmare Teller haunts his victims, showing them their greatest fears by trapping them in a void. So not only can the skill inflict Blackout, it can also cause the victims to suffer from HP reduction. For his effect attack, he's able to deal damage to 2 targets on opposing lines because he has 2 arrows. The idea of Gowther's Sacred Treasure Harriet is to extend his range of powers to reach more targets. So for his stage 3, he increases his targets for his awakened skill to hit all targets. This can be pretty OP. Also, Gowther has a special control ability over Harriet where he's able to lock on one specific target, which explains the taunt casting in stage 1. Merlin is next, and as you guessed it, she is a magic hero. Her passive is simple, only raising her magic attack above and beyond what other heroes like Rin can provide in PvP, and also gives her reflect immunity. But don't worry, we will give her that buff she deserves later on. Don't forget that her passive Infinity lets her increase her power indefinitely. For her skill 1 Fake Ball, she deals 240% magic damage on all enemies, ignores 30% of defense, and also has a 20% chance to freeze or burn those hit. For her skill 2 Endless Whirl, she deals 250% magic damage on 4 enemies, activates chain attack as well when the target dies. For her awakened skill Exterminate Ray, she deals 250% magic damage to all enemies and exploits the vulnerability of the targets. She is overall an attacker too and also relies on some status effects. Exploit vulnerability further ensures she doesn't miss and hits really hard. For her effect attack, she deals additional 5,000 fixed damage to the target. And for her exclusive item Eldon, I want to build on the idea of infinity, which is why for her awakened skill it is able to be reset upon unlocking the stage 1. When her stage 3 is unlocked, this is when she truly becomes a powerful force. She not only enjoys a self boost in crit and lethal rate by 20%, she also amplifies all her allies' attacks under the powers of Power Amplify. Frontline units deal more damage with widespread attacks, while backline allies deal more with concentrated attacks, which tend to have bigger multipliers to begin with. So Merlin also lends herself a support role, and also side note, acts as a great farmer. Finally, we have the strongest deadly synth Escanor, who is a universal hero. His passive Sunshine grants all allies immunity to freeze debuff for 12 turns and also increases defense by 30%. I'm sorry Meliodas, you met your match here. As you all may know, Escanor's power comes from the sun and he also creates suns, so I think there's no way freeze is possible with him on the field. For skill 1 Cruel Sun, it deals 350% physical damage on 3 enemies and also has a 50% chance to burn those hit. For skill 2 Super Slash, he deals 250% on all enemies, has an additional 30% chance for lethal, and also decreases buff duration by 1 turn. His skills are more offense oriented, so then comes his Awakened skill, which is a non-damaging skill. Pretty refreshing for a change. His Awakened skill fully unlocks his potential. Escanor has the ability called The One, where he becomes insanely strong and untouchable. Like in 7 Deadly Sins, The One is a phase which doesn't last for very long, so I gave him 7 turns worth of buffs. Not only does his attacks become stronger, he also becomes bulkier and set off burns when he is touched. For his effect attack, he removes debuffs from allies in the same row. The idea of removing debuffs basically comes from the idea of extreme heat healing off bacteria and viruses. Finally, for his exclusive item Rita, it is meant for him to control his immense powers, but it is also his main slaying tool. Unlocking stage 1 increases the potency of Cruel Sun by melting away his enemy's defenses. Stage 3 unlocks his unique passive, which is called Daytime. Escanor's crit rate increases over time, and while that happens, he also provides passive healing for all his allies with his beautiful sunny power. Overall, he may not see much use in PvE, unfortunately, but I guess he is what he is. So that concludes my wow and crazy video for a potential collab between the Wraith, 7 Deadly Sins and 7 Knights. I had a lot of fun making this and I hope you enjoyed watching it too. Be sure to like and subscribe to my channel for more guides to come. And lastly, to Netmarble, please make this happen. Thank you so much and see you!